You ever notice how some women can control a man without saying a single word? They don't argue, they don't fight. They just play with your emotions like a game. And you don't even realize it's happening until you're already trapped. These aren't just random behaviors, they're psychological strategies designed to keep you chasing, doubting, and obeying. If you're ready to break free from emotional manipulation, if you're done being controlled by guilt, silence, and mixed signals, then this is your wake-up call. Because once you understand the dark psychology behind these games, you'll never fall for them again. So if you're serious about protecting your peace, mastering your emotions, and becoming the kind of man no one can manipulate, hit that subscribe button right now. Because here we don't chase validation, we rebuild power. The validation withdrawal game is one of the most powerful psychological tactics a woman can use without ever raising her voice or saying a word. It begins with intensity, an almost intoxicating flood of attention, affection, and validation. She makes you feel like the center of her world, the man she's been waiting for, the one who finally understands her. Every text, every look, every touch feels like a confirmation that you matter. You start to feel seen, admired, and desired. And that's exactly how the trap begins. Because once you get used to that level of emotional stimulation, your brain starts associating her approval with happiness. You begin to crave it. Then, without warning, she pulls it all away. The texts slow down. The compliments stop. Her energy shifts. Suddenly, she seems distant, distracted, unavailable. The same woman who used to light up when you entered the room now barely notices. You replay moments in your mind, wondering what went wrong, what you said, or what you failed to do. But that's the genius of this game. You can't find an answer, because the withdrawal isn't about something you did. It's about creating uncertainty. And uncertainty is the most powerful psychological hook there is. When your brain doesn't know where it stands, it starts to obsess. It wants resolution. That's why you start chasing, texting more, trying harder, overanalyzing every interaction. You're not doing it out of love anymore. You're doing it out of anxiety. You want to get that old version of her back, the one who made you feel alive. But that version never really existed. It was a performance designed to condition you. Just like a gambler chasing a win, you start investing more energy, hoping the affection returns. That's the emotional addiction she wanted to create. The psychology behind this is called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same principle that keeps people hooked to slot machines. When you receive rewards unpredictably, your brain releases dopamine, not just when you get the reward, but when you anticipate it. That anticipation keeps you emotionally hooked. She gives just enough attention to keep you hoping, then takes it away to keep you chasing. You become addicted not to her love, but to the emotional highs and lows she creates. It's not love. It's psychological control disguised as passion. Over time, this game erodes your confidence. You start questioning your worth. You think, maybe if I do more, she'll come back to how she was. You start compromising your boundaries, your time, your energy. You give and give, hoping to earn back what was freely given in the beginning. But here's the hard truth. Once you start trying to earn someone's affection, you've already lost your power. Because real love doesn't need to be earned, it's reciprocated. The only way to escape this game is to detach from the need for external validation. When you stop chasing her approval, the power dynamic shifts. She no longer controls your emotions because her silence no longer defines your worth. You begin to see that her validation was never proof of your value. It was bait to control your behavior. And once you understand that, the illusion breaks. You start to reclaim your energy. You stop trying to fix what's broken and start focusing on your own peace. You realize that consistency is the true mark of emotional maturity. Anyone who plays with your attention, love, or time to control you isn't someone to impress. They're someone to walk away from. Because confidence isn't about being unaffected, it's about recognizing manipulation and refusing to dance to its rhythm. The moment you stop chasing her approval, you stop playing her game. And in that silence, you rediscover something far more powerful than her attention: your self-respect. The comparison game is one of the most insidious emotional tactics because it preys directly on a man's sense of worth. It doesn't start with open criticism or harsh words. It begins quietly through small, seemingly innocent comments. She might casually mention how her coworker is so ambitious, how her ex was great at communicating, or how her friend's boyfriend surprises her with little gifts. At first, you might not think much of it. You might even take it as a subtle hint to improve. But the truth is, these comments aren't always about improvement. They're about control. They're designed to make you question whether you are enough. You start to feel a quiet pressure build up inside. Suddenly, you notice yourself comparing to, asking if you're doing enough, earning enough, or being enough. That's exactly where she wants you. Because once a man starts comparing himself to others through her lens, he begins to lose his grounding. You become emotionally dependent on how she perceives you. You start trying to meet her unspoken expectations, working harder to gain back that invisible approval that now feels just out of reach. The more you chase it, the less confident you become. The genius of this game is that it uses your own ego against you. Every man wants to be admired by the woman he loves. But when admiration turns into a conditional reward only given when you measure up to someone else, it becomes manipulation. She creates emotional scarcity. Only if you perform well enough will she offer validation. It's no longer a relationship built on connection, but a psychological contest you can never win. Because no matter how much you do, the goalposts will always move. There will always be someone she can compare you to. An ex, a friend, a celebrity, or even a fantasy of the ideal man. Over time, this constant comparison chips away at your self-esteem. You stop feeling like a partner and start feeling like a contestant. You start to lose your natural sense of ease. You overthink your words, your gestures, your choices, hoping to impress her again. The relationship becomes a performance, not a connection. And the irony is, the more you try to prove yourself, the less attractive you become. Why? Because true confidence doesn't seek validation. It radiates it. When you chase her approval, you lose your masculine energy. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth without needing permission to express it. What's dangerous about this game is that it's often disguised as innocent feedback. She might say, "I'm just being honest," or "I'm just saying what I notice." But honesty without empathy is cruelty disguised as truth. When she repeatedly uses other men as examples, she's not just expressing an opinion, she's asserting psychological dominance. She's training you to doubt yourself, to question your place in her world, and to seek her reassurance more often. That's how control works. Not through shouting or demands, but through subtle emotional pressure that bends your self-image over time. The way out of this trap isn't by arguing or demanding she stop comparing. It's by recognizing your own value independent of her words. When you stop internalizing her comparisons, you take away their power. You realize that someone's inability to appreciate your strengths doesn't mean you lack them. It simply means they're playing a game to maintain emotional leverage. And once you see the pattern clearly, it stops working. The strongest men don't compete for validation. They walk away from manipulation. You don't need to be better than her ex, her coworker, or anyone she mentions. You just need to be aligned with yourself, consistent, grounded, and secure. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who tests it through comparison, you reclaim your peace. Because the truth is, real love doesn't compare. Real love accepts. And any relationship built on competition isn't love. It's control dressed as affection. The guilt trap is one of the most emotionally draining games a woman can play because it turns your natural empathy against you. It doesn't rely on anger or confrontation. Instead, it quietly manipulates your conscience until you start doubting yourself. It often starts the moment you try to set a boundary. Maybe you say you need space, maybe you prioritize work, or simply want a quiet night alone. Instead of understanding, she reacts with disappointment or sadness. Her tone softens, her expression changes, and suddenly, you're not the man she was happy with a moment ago. She might say things like, "You don't care about me anymore," or, "I guess I'm just not enough for you." Those words hit deeply because they attack your sense of responsibility, your identity as someone who cares. That's how she traps you, not through force, but through emotional guilt. Once guilt enters the equation, logic disappears. You stop asking whether you've done anything wrong and start trying to fix her feelings. You apologize unnecessarily, compromise your needs, and do things you don't want to do, just to restore peace. But peace built on guilt isn't peace at all, it's submission. You begin to notice a pattern. Every time you express a boundary, she finds a way to make herself the victim. The focus shifts from your need for space or clarity to her pain, her sadness, or her disappointment. And because you don't want to be the bad guy, you give in. You start walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong word or action will trigger another emotional reaction. This is emotional control disguised as vulnerability. Guilt is one of the strongest motivators in human psychology because it activates empathy, fear, and responsibility all at once. The guilt trap works so effectively because it taps into your desire to protect, to fix, to make things right. But here's the truth most men overlook. Love doesn't require constant sacrifice. When someone uses guilt to get what they want, it's no longer about love, it's about power. Each time you give in, you reinforce the behavior. She learns that emotional reactions are an effective way to get you to comply. And over time, this conditioning becomes automatic. You start anticipating her reactions before they even happen, censoring yourself to avoid the guilt that follows. Slowly, your sense of self erodes. You stop expressing your needs, opinions, and desires. You start existing to please, not to connect. That's when you begin to lose your voice. Not because she took it, but because you handed it over in exchange for peace. But it's not real peace, it's a fragile silence built on fear of emotional backlash. This dynamic is one of the most toxic forms of control because it hides behind emotional dependency. It makes you believe that caring for her means abandoning yourself. Breaking free from the guilt trap starts with one simple truth. You are not responsible for someone else's emotions. You are responsible for your actions, not for their interpretations. A healthy woman doesn't use guilt to get compliance. She uses communication to find understanding. If every disagreement turns into an emotional storm, you're not in love. You're in manipulation. And you can't heal someone by sacrificing your boundaries. The moment you stop reacting to guilt, you take away its power. That doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you start caring intelligently. You listen, but you don't absorb every accusation. You show compassion, but you don't abandon your self-respect. When she tries to make you feel guilty for having needs, you calmly hold your ground. Because real strength isn't about giving endlessly. It's about knowing when enough is enough. When a man learns to set boundaries without guilt, he becomes emotionally untouchable. He's no longer controlled by fear of rejection or disappointment. He understands that love built on guilt isn't love, it's emotional dependency. The moment you refuse to carry the burden of someone else's manipulation, you reclaim your freedom. And in that freedom, you rediscover what real connection feels like: honest, respectful, and mutual. The mixed signal game is one of the most confusing and psychologically draining experiences a man can go through because it keeps your mind in a constant state of uncertainty. One day she's warm, affectionate, and fully present, sending long texts, laughing at your jokes, calling you just to hear your voice. The next day she's cold, distant, and detached, acting as if you never mattered. You go from feeling chosen to feeling invisible, and the shift happens so subtly that you can't even pinpoint when or why it began. That's what makes it so powerful. It's not chaos, it's control disguised as unpredictability. This emotional roller coaster activates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. When someone gives affection inconsistently, your brain releases dopamine not only when you receive love, but also in anticipation of it. That anticipation becomes addictive. You start chasing the good version of her, the one who once made you feel safe and wanted. Each time she pulls away, you work harder to bring her back, thinking it's your fault, believing if you just say the right thing, do the right thing, or wait long enough, she'll return to being that loving version again. But that's the trick. She knows you're hooked, not on her, but on the emotional high she gives you when she switches from cold to warm again. The push and pull dynamic becomes the foundation of the relationship. You stop thinking rationally. You start analyzing every word, every emoji, every change in tone, trying to decode what she's feeling. You become emotionally dependent on her mood swings. When she's affectionate, you feel alive. When she's distant, you feel empty. That emotional instability drains you, but you can't walk away because the same person causing the pain is also the one who temporarily soothes it. It's a perfect psychological trap, one that keeps you stuck in confusion, craving connection but never finding stability. This game thrives on your need for clarity. The more uncertain she acts, the more effort you invest to understand her. She may say things like, "I just need time," or "I don't know what I want," but she never actually lets you go. She keeps you emotionally tethered, giving just enough to keep you hopeful. Every time you think it's over, she pulls you back with a sweet message, a nostalgic memory, or a burst of affection. It's like being emotionally starved and then fed just enough to survive. And that tiny bit of hope keeps you from leaving. Over time, this emotional inconsistency starts to rewire your brain. You begin associating love with chaos. You mistake anxiety for attraction, uncertainty for passion. The relationship becomes less about joy and more about survival, trying to hold on to moments of warmth before they disappear again. You don't realize you've entered a trauma bond, a psychological state where your emotions are tied to cycles of pain and relief. It's not love, it's chemical dependency. To break free from this, you have to see the pattern for what it is: manipulation through inconsistency. The moment you stop rewarding mixed signals with attention, you reclaim your control. You stop chasing and start observing. You begin to understand that genuine love doesn't fluctuate with moods. It doesn't keep you guessing. It communicates, it reassures, it stays steady even when things are hard. If someone constantly confuses you, it's not because they're complicated. It's because they're keeping you off balance. Real emotional connection doesn't require decoding. It's clear, consistent, and calm. Once you recognize that, you'll never settle for emotional chaos again. You'll start craving peace more than passion, stability more than excitement. And that's when you finally attract someone who matches your emotional maturity, not someone who feeds on your confusion. Because when you no longer respond to mixed signals, you stop being controlled by them. You rediscover your inner calm, your confidence, and your power. The silent punishment game is one of the most psychologically painful tactics because it preys on your need for communication and connection. When a woman uses silence as a weapon, it's not about solving a problem, it's about control. It begins with something small, maybe a disagreement, a boundary you set, or a moment where you didn't meet her expectations. Instead of discussing it, she goes quiet. She stops texting, avoids eye contact, gives short responses, or disappears emotionally. The shift is cold, deliberate, and confusing. You immediately sense something is wrong, but she refuses to say what it is. That silence fills the air like a thick fog, and suddenly you're no longer focused on the issue itself. You're focused on ending the discomfort. That's how she wins the game. Silence is powerful because it creates anxiety. The human brain is wired to seek resolution when faced with uncertainty. When someone we care about withdraws communication, it triggers a sense of loss and fear of abandonment. She knows this, even if she doesn't say it directly. By withholding communication, she forces you into a psychological chase. You start overanalyzing everything you said, everything you did, trying to find the mistake. You apologize even if you don't know what for. You start reaching out, checking in, asking, "Are you okay?" Or "Did I do something wrong?" But that's exactly the reaction she's looking for. The silence gives her control without having to raise her voice. At first, you tell yourself it's temporary. Maybe she just needs space. But as the days or hours pass, you start to feel desperate. You replay conversations in your mind, trying to decode her behavior. You think if you can just fix it, she'll return to normal. But the truth is, there's nothing to fix. Because her silence isn't a reaction, it's a strategy. She's teaching you that if you don't meet her expectations, she will withdraw affection. She's conditioning you to fear her silence. And once that fear takes root, you begin to self-censor. You stop expressing opinions that might upset her. You avoid conflicts, even small ones. You agree to things you don't like just to keep the peace. That's not love. That's emotional submission. This pattern is especially destructive because it masquerades as emotional maturity. She might say she's not in the mood to talk or needs time to think, but the silence doesn't heal. It punishes. It's not about reflection. It's about power. Communication is the foundation of a healthy relationship. And when one person shuts it down, they're not creating space. They're creating control. The more you chase her during these silent episodes, the more power she gains. She learns that by withdrawing, she can make you chase, apologize, and surrender. It becomes a psychological loop where your need for emotional connection becomes her tool of dominance. The most painful part of this game is that it makes you doubt your own reality. You start to believe you're the problem, that maybe you're too sensitive, too demanding, or too needy. You start shrinking yourself emotionally to fit the version of you she can tolerate. But no matter how quiet or compliant you become, the silence never stops. It's used again whenever she wants control, whenever she wants you to bend. The cycle continues until you either break down or wake up. The only way to stop the silent punishment game is to stop rewarding it. When someone uses silence to manipulate you, meet that silence with calm detachment, not desperation. Don't chase, don't beg, and don't explain yourself repeatedly. If she truly cares, she'll communicate. If she doesn't, her silence reveals everything you need to know. The moment you stop fearing the silence, you take back your emotional power. True strength lies in your ability to stay centered even when someone withdraws. Real love communicates through storms. Manipulation hides behind silence. When you choose peace over panic, boundaries over begging, and self-respect over guilt, you end the game completely. Because once a man learns that silence can't control him, no one can. Awareness is the moment everything changes. The moment you finally see the game for what it is, not what you wished it was. For so long, you may have believed you were in love, that the push and pull, the confusion, the emotional highs and lows were part of a deep connection. But awareness cuts through the illusion. It shows you that what you thought was love was often control, carefully disguised through affection, silence, guilt, or chaos. When you become aware, you stop being a player in someone else's psychological game and start becoming the master of your own emotional state. Awareness doesn't come easily. It usually comes after pain. After sleepless nights wondering why you're not enough. After countless apologies for things you didn't do wrong. After feeling drained by a relationship that promised love but delivered anxiety. It comes when your soul gets tired of confusion. When you realize that love isn't supposed to make you question your worth, it's supposed to remind you of it. That realization changes everything. You stop reacting and start observing. You stop chasing her attention and start watching the pattern. You begin to notice the cycles, how affection follows distance, how guilt follows boundaries, how silence follows disagreement. You see that the pattern isn't random, it's deliberate. And that's when the illusion breaks. Once you're aware, you no longer get hooked by the same emotional triggers. When she withdraws validation, you don't panic, you stay calm. When she tries to make you feel guilty, you recognize it as manipulation, not emotion. When she goes silent, you no longer chase, you give her space and focus on yourself. This shift in behavior completely changes the power dynamic. Emotional control only works when it's invisible. Once you can see it, it loses its power. That's why awareness is dangerous. Not to you, but to anyone who thrives on your confusion. But awareness isn't just about seeing manipulation, it's about mastering your emotions. You can't control what others do, but you can always control how you respond. Most men lose their peace because they're reactive. They respond to every mood, every silence, every word. Awareness teaches you to pause before reacting. It teaches you to look beneath the surface, to see what's driving the behavior. Is it genuine emotion or is it a game? Is it connection or is it control? When you learn to ask those questions, your emotions stop controlling you. You begin to operate from strength, not from fear.